HOA Karen broke my disabled son's arm. Unaware, I'm a federal agent. Welcome to Dabzy Stories. Drop a like on the video and subscribe so we can continue making videos like this one. It was a cold morning. My son Marcus shuffled toward the new playground ramp on his forearm crutches. He was 8, born with spina bifida. His brace kept him standing tall. His laughter rang out, pure and bright. I stayed close. I'm Special Agent Daniel Carter. I work federal cases in plain clothes, but today I wore jeans and a coat. Just a dad with his boy. Then I saw her, Karen Peterson, clipboard in hand, her heels clicked on the pavement. She glared at Marcus. "You can't use that ramp," she barked. "Only wheelchairs allowed." Marcus stopped. He blinked up at her. "It's an ADA ramp," he said softly. Karen's face twisted. "Not for crutches. Bylaw 7.4. Move aside." She shoved his crutch. Marcus stumbled. He tried to stay upright. I moved fast. "Karen," I said, "back off." She sneered. "I enforce rules." I showed my badge. She laughed. "Big shot? Rules are rules." She reached out. Her elbow crashed into his arm. I heard the crack. Marcus cried out, collapsed in the snow. "No," I dropped to my knees. I scooped him up. His arm hung limp. Tears poured down his cheeks. "Dad, it hurts." I held him tight. Neighbors ran over. One dialed 911. Another pressed blankets to his sleeve. I looked at Karen. She turned and fled. The sirens came quick. EMTs wrapped his arm in a splint. The pain in his eyes cut me deep. I climbed into the ambulance beside him. His small hand gripped mine. "At the hospital," I told him. "I'm right here." In the ER, the x-rays showed a spiral break. Surgery was at dawn. Marcus stared at the ceiling lights. "Will I walk again?" he whispered. Tears burned my throat. "Yes, buddy," I said, voice tight. "Yes, you will." Detective Lee appeared. I pulled off my coat to show my badge. "Federal agent," I said. "My HOA's tied to big fraud. She must face the law." He nodded. "We'll handle the HOA side. You focus on your son." I stayed by Marcus's side as they set his bones. His small frame trembled under pain and fear. I whispered, "You're brave." He closed his eyes, drifted to sleep. I thought of Karen's face, cold, entitled, blind to a child's life. I thought of the ramp Marcus loved. I thought of the cases I'd cracked. This one was different. It was in my blood and bone. When dawn came, I walked to the trauma wing doors. I handed my badge to Lee. "Arrest her today," I said. "For assault, for hate, for breaking my boy's arm." He took the badge, his jaw set. "Consider it done." Back in the waiting room, the snow melted outside. The playground ramp stood empty. My son's laughter would return, but not before we made them answer for Karen's cruelty. The next morning, hospital lights glowed harsh. Marcus lay in a crisp bed, arm in a heavy cast. His face was tired, eyes rimmed red. I sat beside him, holding his good hand. He traced the white sheets. "Dad, will it heal?" he whispered. "Yes, champ," I said, voice soft. "You'll run again." Carla wiped her tears. She'd fallen asleep in a chair. The nurse bustled in. "He's stable," she said, checking vitals. "No surgery needed, just rest." Relief flooded me. Detective Lee knocked and stepped in. He laid 2 photos on the tray. One showed Marcus's broken arm, the other a muddy footprint on the ramp. "We found this in Karen's healed," he said. "She wore stilettos." He handed me a folder. Plot twist. Karen isn't acting alone. Inside were HOA bank records padded with phantom landscaping costs and emails linking Karen's account to offshore transfers. She's been stealing HOA funds for months, money laundering, fraud. She used fake security fees as cover. I leaned back. My jaw ate. "So she hurt my son to hide her crimes?" Lee nodded. "She panicked when you started asking questions at the HOA meeting. She targeted Marcus to scare you off." My blood boiled. I forced calm. "We go public today. HOA board needs full exposure." That afternoon, I wheeled Marcus home with hospital wrist guard and ice pack. Neighbors waited on my porch. Mrs. Nguyen held a petition. "Kick Karen out. Protect our kids." Others held signs. "Stop HOA corruption" and "Justice for Marcus." Their support was fierce. Inside, I set my badge on the kitchen table. Carla and I faced the board's call-in line. On speaker, 5 faces, pale, uncertain. Karen's empty chair was gone. President Linden spoke first. "Agent Carter, we're ready to cooperate." I cleared my throat. "Karen Peterson financed personal trips, paid herself consulting fees, and hid money offshore. She assaulted my son to silence me. We have evidence. She's under investigation for assault, fraud, embezzlement, and child endangerment." Board members gasped. One stammered, We had no idea." I pressed on. "Emails, bank transfers, witness statements all point to her. You must remove her and turn over all records to Detective Lee." Minutes later, Lee arrived with a court order. He locked the front door. "I'm placing HOA records under federal seal," he announced. Agents filled the study, seizing computers, ledger books, and Karen's personal files. Carla and I guided Marcus to the lawn. His favorite toy fire truck rolled by his side. He watched the agents, eyes wide. "Is she really gone?" he asked softly. "She can't hurt you anymore," I said, kneeling beside him. Neighbors cheered, clapping as the last box left the house. A banner unfurled between two maples. "Community first, no more fear." That evening, I tucked Marcus into bed. His cast was dry, his smile brave. "Will the ramp be safe now?" he asked. I kissed his forehead. "Yes, we'll guard it together." Outside, wind rustled the trees. The playground ramp stood empty in the dim light, a silent promise of better days. I sat on the porch, Carla beside me, and we watched the stars emerge. HOA corruption had been exposed, and Karen's crimes would land her in prison. But tonight, we held our son close, and his world felt safe again. A week later, I brought Marcus back to the park. His arm was still in a cast, but the smile in his eyes was back. Neighbors gathered, families, seniors, even teens who'd been bullied by Karen in a circle around the ramp. We held a dedication ceremony, a ribbon cutting for Marcus's ramp, renamed in my son's honor. He grasped the oversized scissors carefully with both hands and snipped the ribbon. Applause erupted. Marcus beamed. I felt pride and relief wash over me. Behind us, Detective Lee and a team of federal agents met with the HOA's interim board in the pavilion. I overheard snippets, evidence of a second fraud ring, offshore shell corporations, possible bribery of local officials. I stiffened. Could there be more? That night, as Carla tucked Marcus into bed, I studied the remaining files on my desk. The HOA's financial trail looked deeper than Karen alone. Then I saw it. A series of coded memos between Karen and an unknown email address, Shadow Ridge Management, discussing expanding enforcement and new revenue streams. I traced the header to a nationwide HOA consulting firm with ties to land development corporations. The plot twist struck me hard. Karen's ramp terror was just the local tip of a much larger scheme, one that threatened other communities. The next morning, I met with Detective Lee at the federal office. I handed him the memos, the bank records, and the consulting firm prospectus. "Shadow Ridge is behind this," I said. "They recruit rogue compliance officers, fuel bylaw overreach to scare residents, then sell security contracts and rake in fees across the country." Lee's eyes widened. "This is RICO territory," he said. "We need a takedown." Within 48 hours, undercover agents posed as HOA board members in 2 other states. They recorded meetings where Shadow Ridge reps trained local enforcers to use intimidation tactics, from bogus citations to chemical sprays. Federal warrants were issued. News broke, a multi-state sting targeting fraudulent HOA security schemes. Back home, the park was quiet except for children's laughter. Marcus wheeled himself down the ramp, his cast gleaming in the sun. Carla watched from the bench, proud. I stood at the edge, badge clipped to my belt, no longer hiding my identity. That afternoon, Lee called with a breakthrough. "We've arrested Shadow Ridge's CEO in Phoenix," he said, "and your HOA board president, Lyndon, was on their payroll, took checks in exchange for letting Karen run wild." Lyndon's face flashed on my phone's screen, mugshot beside the CEO's. I exhaled. "Bring them in." 2 days later, federal agents descended on our neighborhood. They arrested Lyndon and several HOA members for racketeering, corruption, and conspiracy. Shadow Ridge agents across 5 states were in custody, facing charges that could carry decades in prison. At the next community gathering, we toasted with lemonade. Marcus raised his cup. "To justice," he declared. Neighbors lifted theirs and cheered. The ramp behind us gleamed under fresh paint, its surface smooth and welcoming. That evening, Carla and I sat on the porch swing. "You did more than fix a ramp," she said softly. "You uncovered a national crime ring." I took her hand. We did it together. Marcus was the spark. He ran out barefoot, chased a firefly into the grass, and giggled. As dusk fell, I looked toward the street. The empty pavilion stood where Karen once patrolled. Now, a new sign read, "Community Watch, Volunteer Patrol Only." I felt hope. Where entitlement and greed had spread, we planted truth and solidarity. And at the heart of it, my son's brave heart and his ramp stood as proof that no scheme, however wide, could break the bond between a father and his child. When trial day arrived, clouds hung heavy over our town. The courthouse was packed with neighbors, news crews, and families who'd suffered under Karen's reign. Marcus sat beside me, his cast now replaced by a sturdy brace, eyes bright but wary. Carla held his other hand. Her smile was proud but tense. Inside, the judge wasted no time. He reviewed the charges: assault on a minor, fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering under the RICO Act. The evidence was overwhelming. Surgical x-rays, camera logs of Karen's attack, the HOA's offshore transfers, and the Shadow Ridge memos outlining nationwide schemes. First, the prosecutor called Detective Lee. Lee described how Karen had grabbed Marcus's crutch, hurled him onto the ramp, and snapped his arm to cover up her fraud. He laid out bank statements showing HOA funds siphoned into her shell companies and detailed the link to Shadow Ridge's enforcement training seminars. Next, I took the stand. My voice was steady. Your Honor, Marcus depends on those ramps and his crutches. Karen's bylaw obsession shattered more than bone. She crushed his confidence. She weaponized rules for profit and terrorized families. I held up the memos. Her crimes stretched across states, training others to harm. No one is safe when greed and entitlement go unchecked. Marcus then spoke, his voice small but clear. I was scared, he said. I couldn't move. I thought I'd never walk again. He looked at Karen through the glass. You broke me, but I'm still here. His words carried across the silent courtroom. Karen's defense tried to plead diminished capacity, stress, misunderstanding, but the memos she'd signed, the emails she'd sent, and the victims' testimonies left no doubt. When offered a chance to speak, Karen's lips quivered. I thought I was saving the neighborhood from rule breakers, she stammered. I didn't mean. Her voice cracked, but no sympathy came. Closing arguments laid out the human cost. Children blinded by spray, seniors bullied, families extorted. The judge leaned back. Karen Peterson, your entitlement destroyed lives. You used private power to harm the vulnerable. Your actions warrant the maximum sentence. He sentenced her to 20 years in federal prison, asset forfeiture, and a ban from any future HOA or security role. For her co-conspirators at Shadow Ridge and the HOA board, each received sentences between 10 and 15 years. As deputies led Karen away, her shoulders slumped. Marcus, brave at the stand, clenched my hand. Neighbors rose in quiet respect, then applause. That afternoon, I wheeled Marcus past the courthouse steps. He paused at the fountain where once children splashed, but now stood silent in remembrance of fear. I lifted him onto the edge so he could dip his brace-covered foot into the water. He grinned. We fixed it, he said. Back at home, I signed the final order, dissolving our HOA's private security contracts and enshrining state oversight of all associations. A new statute passed swiftly. Any HOA enforcement actions must be publicly audited and barred from any use of force or chemicals. 2 months later, Marcus led the dedication of the new Safe Play Pavilion, funded by the recovered HOA assets. He cut the ribbon with a smile that lit the cloudy sky. Families cheered as children streamed inside. That evening, I sat on our porch with Carla. Marcus raced fireflies across the lawn, laughter echoing. I thought of Karen, now locked in a federal cell, rotting in prison like her schemes had intended to rot our community. Entitled cruelty had met the full force of the law. I reached for Carla's hand. He's safe, I said, and so is every child in our town. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Because you fought for him. I watched Marcus chase the glow of fireflies, free, happily unbroken, and I knew that true justice shines brightest in the darkest times. The end.